Hey everybody, this is Matthew Poes of Poes Acoustics, and I got a cool new review for you. We're trying a different format, so we're going to do a little bit of scripting here and see if this goes better. But this is all me. I reviewed the whole thing. Just wanted to try to do a more interesting way of going. So this is the Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2. Picture this: a mysterious new projector bursts onto the scene, breaking crowdfunding records, and whispers start that it's a giant killer, a $3,000 projector poised to dethrone models costing 10 times more. Yeah, I raised an eyebrow too. Hello folks, today we're diving deep into the Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2, a projector that's been all over the internet lately. The hype machine has been in overdrive. Early backers on Kickstarter lauded its 110% Rec 2020 color, Dolby Vision HDR, and even called it a JVC and Sony killer. Bold claims for a newcomer. I'll admit, my initial reaction was healthy skepticism. I've heard the giant killer story before, and usually it ends up being giant, mildly annoyed, rather than slain. So I went into this review with a bit of a smirk, ready to call out any BS. But plot twist, after spending some quality time with the Pro 2, I discovered there is some substance behind the hype. Today's video will be a 15 to 20 minute journey where I give you my honest, slightly snarky take. We'll start with that hype-fueled setup and my skeptical first impressions. Then we'll transition to what this projector is really like to live with, the installation, usability, quirks, and everyday experience. And after that, we'll geek out on technical deep dives like that really cool triple RGB laser light engine and its color performance, the unusual enhanced black level or EBL system that's turbocharging contrast, and its caveats, it's not perfect, the 4K pixel shifting magic from the DLP chip, all right, not magic, and how it handles motion, 24 frames per second. Well, also unpack HDR performance, including Dolby Vision, and why having DV isn't automatically a game changer for projectors. And of course, I'll compare it with the big boys from JVC and Sony, highlighting where the Valerion punches above its weight and where it still bows down. So is the VisionMaster Pro 2 truly the second coming of projectors, or just overhyped? Grab a drink, get comfy, let's find out with a fair bit of snark, plenty of facts, and maybe a surprise or two along the way. So let's jump into this. Have you ever heard so much hype about a product that you go in fully expecting to hate it? That was me with the Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2. The forums were losing their minds. Some folks were calling it a giant killer. Others said it was overhyped marketing fluff. And then there's the crowd saying it's not even a serious projector. It's a lifestyle piece and you shouldn't even be looking at it. So I was skeptical. I've seen these projectors before. I've never been impressed with them. So I set it up and I watched a few real movies on it. Not test patterns. And I lived with it. And here's the thing, the projector is not perfect. And yeah, it's definitely overhyped, but it's also shockingly good in some ways, maybe even great. Let me walk you through what I found. So let's talk about the installation experience. So when it comes to setup, because this wasn't totally plug and play. Like I actually had to rig up a very weird looking tripod stand initially, and then I came up with some better ways to do it because of the limitations. But to me, that's not a game. Well, yeah, you just have to account for this. The projector looks great out of the box. It has a really cool, sleek, modern appearance. It's got that brushed metal fins that give it the look of a very high-end product. It looks like it's passively cooled, but actually, one thing to keep in mind is most of this is plastic, and the fins, they're just decorative. They don't function as real heat sinks. The cooling is handled by fans internally, which is fine. And now for the real pain point, there's no lens shift at all. It's got a fixed offset to the image, and that's almost, well, I shouldn't say that. It's not unheard of in this price range, but it is more and more common nowadays to have some form of at least vertical lens shift. And it means that you better get your install position exactly right because it's really hard to get it lined up with the screen. And you're going to end up giving up pixels basically trying to fix it. In my case, I couldn't mount it to the ceiling because that would have been tough for a review. And so I had to rig up a temporary system. I was able to get it projected properly on my 114-inch widescreen, which I think is about 134 inches diagonal for 16:9. And that's not a small image. And it was tricky getting the projector aligned without any shift capabilities. It probably took me about, I would say, an hour to get everything set up correctly. The zoom ratio is pretty good, but it's not amazing. And because of the limitations, I did have to play around where I could put the projector. So it's limited, but it's got some wiggle room. Bottom line, the projector demands more from your installation than most, but it still has enough flexibility to be usable. Now let's jump into my viewing impressions. So once I got it up and running, I have to tell you, there really was a wow. The first thing that hits you is the color. This projector uses a tri-laser, an RGB laser light engine, and Valerion claims it can hit over 100% of Rec 2020 color space, which is a bold complaint, and spoiler alert, it doesn't quite get there. But independent testing from my friends over at Projector Central, Sammy showed that it hit over 90% of Rec 2020, and that is legitimately impressive. Most projectors don't come close, and those that do are significantly more expensive. Like, I think the next cheapest projector that can do that isn't an ultra short throw, which of course is what these are based on, is like in the neighborhood of $45,000, $50,000. And it shows that in real world content, like you can actually see the difference this color makes. HDR material looks rich, saturated, and vivid in a way that really grabs you. Skin tones look natural, saturated colors pop, and the overall tone of the image feels cinematic. Like I really was enjoying myself with this thing. This is one of the areas where it clearly beats many more expensive projectors. JVC and Sony, at twice the price or more, simply can't hit this level of color volume, not even close. And in fact, when you're at this brightness level, most of those projectors have to lose their cinema filter, meaning they're not even doing anywhere near full DCI P3, let alone Rec 2020. Now let's talk about the 4K image and the sharpness. The VisionMaster Pro 2 uses a Texas Instruments DLP chip with pixel shifting to simulate 4K resolution. Now this isn't native 4K, but it gets close. I tested single pixel 4K patterns and they resolved surprisingly well. There's a little softness around the edges, but that's actually normal, and you see softness even with true 4K projectors. It's likely due to the optics as well as the pixel shifting. Overall, the image looks sharp. Fine details in 4K content come through, hair textures, fine grain, tiny text, all there. No issues at all. It's not quite what you get from a high-end JVC or a Sony with I wrote in here reference grade glass. I wouldn't call it that given what Barco and Christie can do, but it with much better quality optics. But for the price, it's sharp enough to fool most viewers into thinking it's native 4K. Honestly, it looks like 4K. I think it looks great. And at times, it looks sharper than the Elcos type projectors. The black levels, contrast, and EBL is another notable feature. So here's where things get really interesting. DLP projectors, as you probably know, don't have the best native contrast. And that's true here too. On paper, the native contrast on this projector is actually quite awful, but Valerion has added a feature called Extended Black Level, or EBL. I was really skeptical that this was going to work. And while they don't explain exactly how it works, the effect is clear. Black levels are dramatically improved. In dark scenes, the projector looks punchy, shadows have depth, blacks don't crush too badly, although I did notice some black crushing, but they also don't look gray. Is it JVC level black? No, but for DLP, it's really impressive, and honestly, there's a lot of scenes where you couldn't tell the difference that easily. That said, it's not foolproof, and in high APL scenes where you have both dark and bright areas, the EBL system can get a little confused. You'll see some murkiness, like it's trying to keep the blacks dark, but the rest of the image doesn't cooperate. Still, for most content, the illusion works, and it's a big step forward from what you'd expect at this price point. In fact, I'd like to see features like this used on DLP projectors across the board, and I think we are starting to see very similar features from companies like Barco and Christie. All right, so now let's talk about motion and 24 frames per second handling. Here's one of the VisionMaster's weak points. Most cinematic content is shot at 24 frames per second, but the TI DLP chip can't natively handle 24 frames per second. I think it's something like 46 frames per second, but for this purpose, 48. So the projector has to do some trickery, either black frame insertion or frame doubling to compensate. I don't know which they're doing, but the result was a subtle smoothing effect. It's not full-blown soap opera mode, but if you're used to proper 24 frame per second playback, you're going to notice it. And at first I found it distracting. I kept looking for features in the menu. I was complaining to my friend Sammy and others about it who had looked at this projector. But it's just how this projector works, and there was nothing I could do. Over time, I noticed that I adjusted. Like I went in, I watched a movie, and I didn't notice it anymore. But when I went back to my JVC, which does handle 24 frames per second natively and correctly, I definitely noticed the difference again. And so going back, I found that its motion handling wasn't its strong suit and wasn't my favorite. I'd like them to work on it, but it's not awful, and I think most of you probably won't care that much. Now let's talk about HDR and tone mapping. The VisionMaster Pro 2 supports HDR, HDR10+, Dolby Vision, and it has a dynamic tone mapping system to work with HDR. Now, Dolby Vision on a projector is a bit of a marketing stunt since projectors don't have fixed peak brightness levels. Dolby Vision has to guess, and that makes it less effective. You could put in a number, but they don't offer you the ability to do that. That said, Valerion's dynamic tone mapping is actually quite good on its own, and it handles HDR with finesse. Like, I think it works quite well. Is it as good as the outboard video processors like a MadVR? Absolutely not, but it works really well. Highlights don't blow up that bad, shadow details are preserved, and the overall image feels well balanced. I personally don't think Dolby Vision adds much to the projector, other than it does give you access to the Dolby Vision versions of streaming content, which is sometimes a good thing. A good DTM system, I often think can be better, and even experts involved in Dolby Vision development have said as much. Now, is this projector a giant killer? Well, so let's address this question, because that was what everybody was claiming. And honestly, my opinion is it's not a giant killer. It's not a JVC NZ900 or 800. It doesn't have the optics. It doesn't have the native contrast. It doesn't have the motion fidelity. It's not a Sony with buttery smooth gradation, and it doesn't have the sharpness. The blacks aren't as good. It doesn't look quite as good with content. It doesn't have quite as clean of an image. But here's the thing. It doesn't really need to be at this price point. It's doing things those projectors can't do, especially at this price. The color performance is unmatched in its class. The sharpness is pretty solid. The HDR tone mapping is legit. I think the value is just off the charts with this projector. Yeah, it's overhyped a bit, but it's also underappreciated by those who dismissed it as a lifestyle toy. If I couldn't get my hands on a Christie or a Barco, I'd seriously consider this projector. The color alone is worth it. And that's something that I've been finding more and more with reviewing projectors, is that when you have a really bright image and really good color, it often makes up for some of these deficiencies. I could happily put together a very high performance home theater with this projector, and I would happily do so. So what's the final verdict? The Valerion VisionMaster Pro 2 isn't perfect. It's a little plasticky in some ways. It lacks lens shift. The motion handling needs work. And EBL isn't a miracle cure. But in the right room, with a little effort, this projector delivers a bold, bright, colorful image that's better than you'd expect. It's fun to watch. It's impressive in HDR. And it challenges what we think projectors in this price range are supposed to do. Is it overhyped? Sure. Is it amazing? It actually, I think, is kind of amazing. It's a very impressive projector. And quite frankly, I think this makes the other companies out there producing projectors at under 30 grand needing to watch their back. Now, thanks for watching this video. Please hit subscribe if you want more brutally honest reviews like this one, and let me know in the comments. Is this the best value projector out there, or just a plastic box with laser beams and good PR? I'd actually be really curious what you guys think of this thing and what your experience is with it. I get to play with all the high-end toys. I get to use some of the best projectors on the market, and I know what they're capable of doing compared to this projector. This, honestly, I would rather not give this thing back. I would hook it up in my room and use it, even though I have a JVC, even though I have access to other projectors, and in fact, have talked about putting in a Christie. It's a really good value for the money, and I would be surprised if many of you didn't find that it offers a very compelling experience. It's not perfect. The blacks aren't great, as I already said, but it is a really good projector. What I think is most exciting is the RGB laser tells us that this is something that everybody should be looking to implement, because it would dramatically enhance other projectors. The other thing I think that's important to take away from this is that if we were to start to lose companies like Sony and JVC or Epson in the home cinema projector game, there's companies waiting to take place that could actually give us something compelling. Because could you imagine if Valerion, and Hisense is probably the OEM for this projector, could you imagine if they could offer something using the 0.67 inch DLP chip or a 0.9 inch or something like that? Could you imagine what would happen if they were willing to do a $30,000 projector or a $15,000 projector instead of a $3,000 projector? I mean, I think that what that tells us is that there is the possibility, even if it was based on DLP instead of LCOS, of having something that is really compelling. And I think that the projectors would be that much better. I actually said as much to Valerion. I talked to their PR guys and I said, look, if you guys could make like a $15,000 projector and just upgrade everything quite a bit, better lens, better chipset using one of the larger ones, more flexibility in installation, and even more brightness, like maybe 5,000 lumens, that would be really compelling and would compete very well with some of the other products on the market. So we'll see what happens. I don't know that we're going to start seeing a lot more products like that, but it would be nice. And for $3,000, even I think it's $4,000 for the new Max model, I really think this thing is a great value. I was shocked, and I fully expected to come into this review telling you guys this thing is overhyped garbage and you shouldn't buy it. And that isn't how I walked away. So thanks again for watching.